ẹni lójú ẹ̀san àkẹ́ o gbogbo ẹni àṣebàjẹ́ ẹ̀san máa ń bọ̀ ìgbẹ̀yìn lójú.
All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. We're happy to have you join us for this edition of our Distinguished Personality Lecture Series, where we're featuring Dr. Nisha Rayaroth. I hope I got that correctly, who is a historian, a social historian, and has been working on circus animals for a while. So we're happy to have you join us. Just to read a brief bio of Dr. Nisha. Dr. Nisha is a historian and the author of Jumbos and Jumping Devils, a social history of Indian circus, was published by the Oxford University Press in 2020. She has been a Fulbright Fellow at Yale University, a Mellon SSRC Fellow at the University of the Witwatersrand, a Research Fellow at the Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Study, and most recently at the International Institute of Asian Studies, Leiden. So we're happy to have somebody of this huge profile join us for this edition of the West African Traditional Justice Distinguished Personality Lecture Series. Just a brief introduction to our center before we dive into the lecture. The West African Traditional Justice Center is a center that was initiated to intervene or bridge the gap between the research and practice of traditional justice across the West African corridor, but we also try to take our interventions to other parts of the globe. And you can see that's why we are having this lecture today. The intention is to ensure that there is evidence-based practice of traditional justice across the West African corridor. And this is part of our own contributions to this by bringing experts to come and discuss their research on social justice issues and allied areas generally. So today, we're going to be discussing circus animals from the global south, ethics and politics. Of course, I've introduced the guest lecturer, Dr. Nisha Rayaroth, who is going to be delivering this very interesting topic. The moderator for this event is Professor Senayon Olaoluwa of the Institute of African Studies, but he's yet to join us. We're still expecting him. So anytime is available, then we'll have to hand over the platform to him to continue the moderation. But so I'll stand in for him in the meantime, and I'll invite Dr. Nisha to present a lecture for us. Thank you, Dr. Nisha. You have the platform now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for this kind invitation to deliver a talk at the West African Transitional Justice Center. It's my immense pleasure to speak at this platform, and I'm immensely grateful that for extending this invitation. And this talk is actually based on my book, which came out in 2020 with Oxford University Press. This talk actually forms a small part of the chapter that came out with this book, Jumbos and Jumping Devils. But it's, again, still an ongoing work since the debate on animal rights and justice and the rights for equality and liberation is an ongoing area. And still, you know, the debates are, it's very contemporary in that sense and very thriving at the moment, even at the moment while I'm speaking. So this talk today, Circus Animals from the Global South, Ethics and Politics, will focus on the legal ban on circus animals, especially in India, while largely contextualizing it within the Global South and the ramifications of such a ban on animals, as well as their human compatriots Animals have always been an indispensable part of the circus around the world until the legal prescriptions in many countries and the emergence of new concepts such as no circ, the new circus, the contemporary circus, or the more popular social circus. Social sciences and humanities have begun posing different questions like, can animals have histories, memories, and subjectivities? Contemporary social history recognizes the position of animals as analogous with that of marginal human groups who are underrepresented. South African historian Sandra Swart argues that drawing upon the gendered or women history paradigm, perhaps historians' first step could be to simply demonstrate that animals have a history at all. And we should explore how social history can be enriched by focusing on history from animal perspective. Is it possible to have a history from animal perspective? And equally, the tools provided by social history reveals the historicity of animals. Let me just share my screen. I hope you can see.
Yes, yes, we can.
Thank you. So this is actually my book that came out in 2020, which is, it's almost 5 years now. So it's really a pleasure to be talking about the book. It actually came out while I was in South Africa. So it's actually a pleasure that I'm talking about the animals, circus animals, and this book at the West African Transitional Justice Center. Animals in circus brings to the fore a culture of animal taming, and human accompaniment, raising significant questions regarding their acquisition, captive life, and breeding. They're inextricably linked with the colonial genealogy of the exotic and the exhibit. The circus animals, who are a minority in every sense, hardly figure even in the histories of wildlife, environment, and livelihood in India, is not at all surprising, because despite the fact that Indian circus is almost a century and a half years old, its past and histories remain largely unexplored. It definitely needs much more research. Not just the case of India. In fact, the circus studies remain in the periphery of the academia. Not much works have come out on circuses or circus histories. Some works, countable number of works have come out on the circus histories in Australia, America, or Europe. But South Asia and Africa more or less remains unexplored. And sorry, just please. Oh. Just give me a second. I have to charge my laptop. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Sorry about that. So in the academia, circus studies remains at the periphery of the academia. In the case of India, if we look at the history of circus in India, it's almost a century and a half years old. And with the emergence and prominence of cultural studies over the past few decades, popular culture, body, performance, and marginal communities, subaltern communities are being studied, widely studied in the academia. But circus still remains as a new area yet to be explored. So when I started my research almost like 16 years ago, the major challenge that I faced was not just the absence of archival state official records, but also the absence of diaries, memoirs, and personal histories. While if you look at the few countable number of works that exist on the histories of United States, Europe, or Australia, we can actually find as a few works of historical studies, personal histories, or memoirs that have come out on the circus. But in the Indian subcontinent, Kerala, on the other hand, or Bengal in the east, or Maharashtra in the central regions, have rich past when it comes to circus histories. Circus acrobatics, animal training, entrepreneurship, all of these have rich past in the all these south, east, or the central regions of India. But books on circus are rare, and the few works in the South Asian languages such as Malayalam, Hindi, Bengali, Kannada, or Marathi, circus is the works that have come out are more or less written by people from the circus community itself, persons from within the community, and none of these are translated into English. So these literary works and books are more or less intended for general readership, and these works actually do not take into account the histories of circus animals with the socio-political significance they require. So I think that's where my research actually has its own significance. This talk focuses on the historical ban on the training and performance of certain wild animals by the government of India and the consequent legal battle between the state and the circus community. So my attempt would be to look at these issues within the context of various interventions by the colonial and the post-colonial states in the Indian subcontinent, advocating protection and conservation, and its emblematic institution, the zoo. This would unravel, I hope, how the very idea of scientific conservation becomes a violent guile of the state and the civil society, while actively propagating the binary of cruelty and mercy in the case of circus animals. You can see in this photo the captivity of an animal, which many animal lovers and rights activists have already pointed out. In fact, animal lovers and rights activists around the world have often pointed their fingers at the circus regarding the cruel methods used to train and tame animals, which include blinding, removal of teeth and claws, deprivation of food and medication, forced breeding, whipping and electric shock, their lives in undersized cages, and transportation from place to place in appalling conditions. Over the past few decades, many countries, more than 40 countries actually, have issued total or partial bans on the animal performances in the circuses, nationwide and provincially. In 2009, Bolivia banned the use of all animals, both wild and domestic, in the circus, being the first nation to do so. If we look at the African continent, for instance, Nigeria, Ghana, Congo, Angola, all of these countries have banned animal circuses. In the southern side of Africa, Botswana, Zambia, and Namibia, in the northern side, Senegal, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, and in the eastern side, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Uganda have banned animal circuses. It is interesting to note in this context that South Africa and Egypt, with a history in animal circuses that goes back to a century or more, haven't yet banned animal circuses. However, in India, on 2nd March 1991, the Environment Ministry of the Government of India issued an order banning the training and performance of 5 categories of animals. Let me quote from the ruling, this order. In exercise of the powers conferred upon him under Section 22 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, the President is pleased to order that no person shall train or exhibit the animals specified below: bears, monkeys, tigers, panthers, and dogs. In the corrigendum dated 7th August 1991, the ban on dogs was withdrawn and lions were substituted instead. It's interesting to note in this context that elephants, even though elephants have a longer history in South Asia, performing and, as working animals or performing animals, do not even figure in this list of animals that was banned by the Indian state. Anyway, less than 3 weeks after the Environment Ministry's ban order, the Delhi High Court granted a stay on this order on a petition filed by the Indian Circus Federation, the Circus Owners Association. As a result, the animals continued in the circus ring. 6 years later, after hearing the case at length, on 21st August 1997, the court ordered the government to reconsider their ban order afresh. Both Indian Circus Federation and Indian Circus Employees Union, the only existing circus workers union in India, it's an all India union, moved the court challenging this order. On 16th December 1998, the Delhi High Court dismissed the petition of Indian Circus Federation. Consequently, Indian Circus Employees Union, the only union for circus workers, withdrew its petition the next year. So there were many cases that were filed by circus companies in courts around the country against the seizure of animals and seeking compensation from the government. The most significant ruling came from the High Court of Kerala in a petition from the south of India, in a petition filed by the employees of Jumbo Circus, one of the major circus companies in India. Dismissing the petitioner's plea, the division bench asked in their telling judgment, if humans are entitled to fundamental rights, why not animals? The petitioners appealed to the Supreme Court of India, but to no avail. The apex court dismissed their appeal in a later on hearing on 1st May 2001, and the animals were banned. So the ban, faithful in the lives of thousands of circus artists and workers around the country, has become a significant moment in the collective memory of the circus community. Even those who had retired from the trade long before the ban, often begin telling their life stories with some statement about its aftermath. The central argument of the petition filed by the Jumbo Circus was that, let me quote, the notification dated 14th October 1998, issued by the government, arbitrarily threatens the livelihood of around 40,000 animal trainers, caretakers, handlers, and performers, and that the petitioners herein are carrying on their trade, occupation, art, profession for nearly 109 years, unquote. So the circus workers and owners argue that the circus animals, which were born and brought up in the circus, were now accustomed only to a circus way of life. They would not survive in the wild or with any other animal or in any other surrounding, whether it's the zoo, a sanctuary, or a jungle. They cited the deaths of 2 circus animals from the Golden Circus just within 2 months of their rehabilitation in the Borivali National Park, Mumbai, and the deaths at the Alipur Zoo, where animals from the mobile petting zoos were rehabilitated. They pointed out that far from living in improved circumstances after rehabilitation, the animals were kept in the same cages in which they were brought for more than 6 months. They also brought before the court the plight of race horses, elephants used in temple festivals, bullocks used for pulling carriages, donkeys used for carrying weights in hostile climates, and the animals being transported to slaughterhouses in cramped vehicles for many hours. In short, the petitioners, the circus workers and owners, argue that there is a case of discrimination, as there are many other spaces where humans cause animal suffering and make use of the animal labor. Interestingly, the committee constituted to review this ban on animals criticizes the attempt to draw a parallel between the zoo and the circus and argues that the circus groups have failed to appreciate the total changes in the zooethics of late, and shows that, let me quote, the circuses may never be able to achieve the standards of housing and upkeep of animals that the modern zoo provides, unquote. However, in August 2013, after 2 decades actually, the Animal Welfare Board of India issued a ban on the elephant performances in the circus. It is worthwhile noting in this context that elephants figure dominantly in the national policy of India. Project Elephant was launched in 1992. The Elephant Task Force was constituted in 2010 by the Ministry of the Environment and Forest. In the same year, elephant was declared the national heritage animal. The Asian elephant was declared as the national heritage animal of India. As historian Mahesh Rangarajan, who headed the task force, notes elsewhere, the fact that a species is unique as well as rare has eventually played a role in nationalist projects to protect, review, and propagate it. Quote, unquote. Soon after the court rulings upheld the government order, the zoo authorities around the country were instructed to raid circuses and take away the animals. Various animal rights NGOs gave a helping hand in the raids and strengthened campaigns against circuses, posting reports and requests widely on the internet. The circular issued to all chief wildlife wardens for the rehabilitation of circus animals, specified 5 shelters over various states across India. These 5 shelters were actually 5 zoos in various parts of India. The circus owners complained that large numbers of animals taken from them were missing when they reached the zoos. So this circulation, this circular was issued to take away the animals and to be rehabilitated in the 5 zoos, which were zoos turned rescue centers across India. So the circus owners complained that a large number of animals taken from them were missing when they reached the zoos. In fact, a similar scenario was happening in Mexico. In 2014, hundreds of circus workers raising apprehensions about such a ban had protested and gave protest performances in the city square in Mexico City against the ban. In 2015, however, Mexico introduced a federal ban by the Green Party on circus animals, including tigers, lions, zebras, and elephants. Echoing the conditions of India, there were several news reports on the Mexican states failing to provide for the upkeep of the saved circus animals. Associated Press reports about 6 tigers, 7 baboons, 4 camels, and 3 dromedaries were found abandoned without food and water. The Guardian reports that there is a thriving black market of exotic species, raising suspicions regarding the actual protection of these animals. And many of these animals actually reached the black market of exotic animals in Mexico. It was almost similar in the case of India. There was a case in Patna, Bihar, in the north of India, where some animals, lions, tigers, and monkeys were actually abandoned by Ajanta Circus, one of the circus groups in India, because the circus was being raided by the zoo authorities. So the zoo authorities demanded that the animals be handed over to them because that's the law now. And the circus groups, circus owners and workers protested, saying that they are still our animals, and the case is still running in the court. So what happened was all these animals were abandoned by the circus in Patna, and the circus moved to the next city. And the zoo authorities who came to claim the animals, take away the animals, left empty-handed. So who actually suffered were the animals. They were left there starving, and there were many lions and tigers were found in the cages for several days. Sujit Dilip, who runs Rambo Circus, remembers Rama Master, who used to be a tiger trainer, who committed suicide after his animals were taken away. Babu, a ringmaster from Jammu, told me that many of his seniors who lost a job did not even have a home to go back to, because they have been living in the circus for it's a different life, and people who have been living in the circus for sometimes just must have run away from home, or they must have adopted to the circus way of life. Many of these animals died an untimely death. Many of these animals taken away from the circus groups who were to be rehabilitated in the 5 zoos across India, died an untimely death, traveled long distances, some without food and water. Animals had to remain in cramped cages for several months They were deprived of sex since they were not considered wild, but hybrid, that is neither African nor Asian. In fact, I was visiting Tirupati Zoo in 2013, and the zoo curator's office provided me with the information that almost all the tigers and tigresses have perished, and 45 animals have already dead and gone. The Telegraph actually reports about the Tirupati Zoo animals, the circus animals rehabilitated to the Tirupati Zoo as if they were in a caste system, because these animals were kept, the male animals were kept in a separate place, and female animals were kept in a separate place because the zoo law clearly does not allow mating between hybrid breeds. And circuses have bred across pedigrees, so they were kept in two different systems, different places. Another significant allegation about the state policy by the petitioners was that the zoos in Junagadh, Mysore, and Tirupati were revamped with the animals taken from various circuses. Animal Defenders International, an NGO, records that the animal rescue centers were over their capacity, with the exceeding number of animals collected from circuses. This throws light on the fact that the state did not have an accurate data about the number of animals they were going to deal with. So one may ask whether a change of ownership from the private circus to the public zoo, most of the zoos in India are public, owned by the government, makes any difference in the real suffering of animals. The situation of animals have been out of the fire, out of the frying pan into the fire. So this question, whether this shift, this rehabilitation, or those who are concerned with the rights, animal rights, seldom pay any attention to what goes on afterwards, right? So whether this makes an actual difference in the real suffering of animals is a concrete question here. Anyway, the early circuses around the world were, in fact, itinerant menageries with ticketed exhibitions of caged animals from the wilderness and the exotic lands. This is important because the zoos, which have become safe havens for animals, where in fact, many of them had histories of animal performances. And the circus animals are being banned because they're performing and they are being trained in a particular way. But these institutions, many of these institutions had similar performances that circuses had in the 19th and 18th centuries. In fact, Philip T. Robinson actually talks about in his book about Toto riding, chimpanzee tea party, where the chimpanzees would sit around a huge table to have dinner, having a dinner tea party or a dinner party. And there were several other acts which were performed in the circuses. In fact, I think in Adelaide, Adelaide Zoo actually had a circus, a working circus along with it when it was established. So there was no effort from the ministry that banned the circus animals to rehabilitate the trainers or keepers along with the animals. Nor did they find it necessary to give any compensation to the animal trainers or their assistants. Some of these instances point out how those who argue for legal prescriptions seldom pay any attention to the rehabilitation of the lives of humans any more than animals caught in the game. Civil society's uncivil acts, as historian Meena Radhakrishna piercingly calls it, while discussing how the Kalanda community's livelihood was completely shattered following the ban on their traditional occupation of bear dancing. So they actually turned to poaching and other criminal activities. It's the ban on bear dancing. Actually, they are traditional bear dancers in the part of northern part of India, who used to train their bears, make them perform small acts and earn the livelihood. But with the animal ban, it actually completely shattered their livelihood, and they had to seek for other occupations, which many of them turned to poaching. Martha Carey Worthington emphatically notes ethically, ecologically, and ethnologically acceptable ways of interspecies association are possible and desirable, and they could develop even in zoos and circuses. For this to happen, those such institutions must change, not be banned. If this change occurs, she thinks, just as we keep a watch on the human rights, we will also develop our own understanding of animal rights. So Martha Carey Worthington was in fact employed by the Royal SPCA in Britain to do research on the circus animals in Britain. Her research was initially supported by the RSPCA, and they were actually planning to issue a ban on the circus animals. So what happened was, after her research, she came up with a positive report that circus animals need to be left alone. I mean, they can actually, I mean, we have already seen her view of how pro-animal, that animals can actually survive and develop animal rights could be maintained in zoos and circuses. So she came up with this report that more or less looked like a pro-circus report to RSPCA, and they immediately backed out from their support from her research. And they had already decided to ban animals in the circus. And when her report came up, later her work was published, but without the support of RSPCA, and it was clearly indicated in the book that this is just the author's view and the researcher's view, and nothing to do with RSPCA. So that's something that happened. I was having communications with her. The ban, on the other hand, directly affected a large marginalized group of animals. Not just animals, but humans as well, who were cohabiting with these animals. At the same time, this ban hardly affected certain other dominant exhibition spaces of captive animals, such as elephants in temples. The most ironical fact that these exhibitions are not even considered as animals in performance. So there are these huge festivals in southern India, especially, where almost like 80 to 180 elephants are paraded, and as part of this Hindu religious festivals. And but these animals, it is more or less considered as heritage, And there's another similar performance called Jallikattu, which is again from which is similar to the bullfighting, Spanish bullfighting. It's supposedly as old as 400 BC or something. So there was the government, because of the animal rights NGOs have been trying to ban Jallikattu. The government actually tried to issue a ban over Jallikattu, this bullfighting. But there was a huge hue and cry against it, saying that it's part of Tamil heritage and legacy. And the government actually issued a circular and removed the ban. What makes certain performances and spaces legitimate and certain others illegitimate is a triggering question in this context. In a short piece titled The Moral Status of Animals, philosopher Martha Nussbaum argues that a truly global justice definitely requires looking across the world for fellow species members who are entitled for a decent life. Interestingly, what has inspired Nussbaum's take on animals and global justice here is the ruling of the Kerala High Court I mentioned earlier in the introduction. In the case of circus animals, and the court's statement, if humans are entitled to fundamental rights, why not animals? On the other hand, political theorist and ethicist Alistair Crane says that sentient animals have a right not to be made to suffer, and not to be owned by another is uncontroversial. In the case of animals, it is skeptical. While human right not to be owned by another is uncontroversial, in the case of animals, it is skeptical. Historian Jason Hribal argues, let me quote him, every animal knows through learned response and direct experience which behaviors are rewarded and which ones are punished. Captive animals know all of this, and yet they still carry out such actions, often with a profound sense of determination. This is why these behaviors can be understood as a true form of resistance. They have a conception of freedom and a desire for it. They have agency. And Bruno Latour has also talked about the agency of animals and non-human objects. And Peter Singer, whose work is animal liberation, is often considered as a primal important work in the case of animals, animal histories, has pointed out that speciesism is as violent as racism or sexism, that species, that humans are a species, that animals, elephant is a species, or monkeys are a species, is as violent as racism or sexism. So this is, let me just show you some of the other photographs. You can actually see it's a huge pig with clowns performing in a circus. And pigs are not usually, it's not very common to have pigs performing in the circuses, even though tigers, lions, and other animals like crossbreeds, weird crossbreeds like tiger existed in the circus. Arab horses were considered one of the Appaloosa horses as well, considered as a very rare breed, and they were they were part of the circuses. You can actually see these women holding lion cubs in their hands. One of the memory that's shared by a journalist. Actually, one of the circus artists shared this incident with me, that this journalist was visiting one of the circus owners a long time, few years ago, and he was just looking through the, velvet, because it's a circus owner, and the owner's tents are really nicely kept, and it's one of the most well-maintained tents for cohabitation in the circus, tents for habitation in the circus, sorry. So this journalist was just looking around, and he could see that two cats, bigger in their size, were playing around, and he thought, then the circus owner came in and he said, those are not cats, they're actually tiger cubs. So the stripes will soon become clearer. So these are instances of how, cohabiting with animals was quite alive in the circus. Many people who had a long time association with animals, and many actually memorized such animals whom they cohabited with. And the interesting thing is that even though this is happening and there is a subhuman existence of animal trainers and performers who have been cohabiting with these wild animals, many times an animal trainer is a typical metaphor of supremacy and cruelty, especially in literature, especially in certain strands of feminist literature. The animal trainer personifies a brutal and violent masculinity that pains, controls, and inflicts pain on the feminine nature or the wild. Nationalist literature often deploy this metaphor to represent the colonizer, while the animal signifies the colonized. It is in the gray expanse between the metaphor and the lived experience of an animal trainer that one finds the pain and peril in taming and training an animal, and the fear, intimacy, and love the two being shared. So you can actually see from these photographs how they are holding the lion cubs. And this is another telling photograph, which actually talks about the intimacy between the circus people and the animals. And this is a chimpanzee cub. This actually reveals not just their relationship with the chimpanzee cub, but also with its mother, and you can see in other photographs where women holding, it's an elephant, and they are super nicely posing for a photograph with an elephant. So this is Damu Dhotre and Sonia. And Damu Dhotre has been a transnational figure who went on to train animals, wild animals. This is his leopard, who is known as Sonia. And Damu Dhotre is a transnational figure who worked in many circuses, Russian, Asian. He was working in the Ringling Brothers, the American Ringling Brothers, supposedly one of the world's biggest circus, 5-ring circus. And this is actually while he was with the Ringling Brothers, this photo. And he has written a rare autobiography called The Wild Animal Man, as told to Richard Taplinger, which was published in the United States and Canada in 1961. It was translated only 12 years later into his mother tongue Marathi. And this is a pioneering memoir which actually offers a view into the culture of animal training, and it's a contribution in the field of wildlife history in India itself. And the interesting thing is that his family had a tradition of animal training in the circuses. And he says that not a single drop of blood was shed by my family while in his whole career, while he was training the animals. He says they are animals with huge strength, right? I mean, you don't need, he used to perform this item where 4 tigers, 4 jaguars, and 4 lions were unleashed in one ring, and he would perform with all 12 animals. He says that 12 animals are not necessary to kill you. 1 animal is more than enough. And human being is absolutely powerless when it comes to these animals, and they choose not to kill you. And that's where this intimacy or this domestication works, where actually in one of the initial chapters of his book, he says he was not even thinking of training these animals, but how to establish a friendship with them. Anyway, he has dedicated his book to this animal, leopard, Sonia. And he says, in all my life, I've never met another animal like her. The dedication goes on like this: Sonia, the most beautiful of them all. So this is something which I just want to discuss, and I hope this actually complicates the human-animal relationship that borders around bonding and bondage. And it's a complicated scenario where you know, where the animal rights and discourses needs to take into account the animal trainers from the circus, and also the captivity of animals. It's a discourse that needs to take into account the human-animal relationship in its historical context and the socio-political inequalities that surround, which would raise broader questions of race, caste, and gender or animal rights discourses. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm so happy that you all joined me today, and I'm really thankful for that. And it's really my pleasure to give this talk at the West African Transitional Justice Center. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nisha, for your very elaborate and detailed discussion of this aspect of your book, which is quite unique. And I'm going to try to attempt a summary from a layman's perspective, you know, of your talk thus far. I'm not trying to bore us, but like I typed in the chat, you can always drop your questions or signify by raising up your hand to speak just after my summary. So Dr. Nisha told us about the importance of our work in documenting the circus tradition in India, which is about 150 years. And because all other areas of entertainment, pop culture had enjoyed quite significant amount of research and scholarship, but we cannot say the same for circus. And this is why even the talk of today is very important. And she told us this tradition transcends or transverses continents, North America, that's the US, Europe, Australia, and of course, India. And the focus of the lecture was on the legal dynamics within the colonial and post-colonial tradition of Circus tradition in India. It seeks to create a nuanced view of the intersections of cruelty and mercy with the state intervention in terms of in respect to animals that were used, in circus. She called our attention to the African continent, where she told us that South Africa and Egypt are yet to ban animals being used in circuses, even though they have this tradition. So it's not far away from us. She told us about the ban in 1991. I hope I got the date right, but it was in the 1990s where the Environment Minister of India announced, the ban. And this was challenged by the Circus community to say that they should reconsider the ban. And she went on to tell us about how significant this moment of the ban was for those who were involved in these circuses, especially in terms of interpreting their own histories, in this light. This created not just livelihood for them, but it was also a way of living in building relationship with the animals. And that was why she ended. I enjoyed the ending of Damodotri and the relationship was able to build with the animals. So I think through our lecture, she made us to understand how the animals were worse off outside of the circuses that when they were taken to the zoos and the kinds of maltreatments that they encountered, and they were not able to, survive. They were used for carriages, they were used in temple festivals. Some were, just rough handled to slaughterhouses. And so the aim of the state intervention itself wasn't really achieved because the animals were worse off. She drew examples from Mexico, the US, telling us about these bans and all. Now, this ban was not just what impacted on the animals alone, but the circus communities themselves, those who were accustomed to living within these circus communities, who had nowhere else to return to. Some committed suicide, some did not have access to way of living. Animals had no food, no water. Also, it led to extinction of some animals because of the kinds of rules. So this is also the legal dynamics where animals were not allowed to mate, because of the rules of the zoo. And so it shows the intersection, it shows the contradictions or the challenges that could arise in terms of geographies or locations of animals and the kinds of environment in which they are built. I'm happy that Dr. Wosheni is here with us, so I would really love to hear his own views. Working on eco-justice, in Harvard at the moment. So I would love him to speak to, the place of animals in all of this environment, especially when it comes to man. You didn't mention any aspect of diseases though, so I may have to trigger a question on that, at some point, whether across your research you came across zoonotic diseases, the kinds of challenges that humans may have living with animals or performing with these animals in these different, circuses. So you also spoke about how elephants were used for temples, for huge festival in southern India where 81 elephants were paraded. And so government intervention did not really take care of these animals. I think that was the very valid point that you tried to take us through then. Also, in terms of that religious festival, I think one thing that came up that was so important is the contradictions that may happen between tradition or religion and modernity. Where people talk about their heritages and what they are used to. Of course, we talk about rituals here and certain kinds of performances that are carried out with animals. and how the modern state says this is cruelty to animals, but we want to emphasize the fact that this is how our forefathers carried this out. And you violate our culture and tradition if you prevent us from carrying out some of these performances. You reference Martha Nussbaum, in terms of the centrality of animal rights in attaining global justice. And you also spoke about ideas of ownership, how the dynamics change when it comes to owning a man, as in terms of slavery and ownership of animals as well. You also you spoke to the aspect of agency of animals. How do we try to interpret all of these complicated issues? At what point do we respect the agency of animals? Where do we know how to stop, from intruding on their natural habitat and trying to also domesticate them, for living? You also spoke about speciesism and cohabitation and the interpretive culture. People grow used to these animals over time. So in order not to present another lecture, let me just end on the note of this pioneering memoir, which is something that is so beautiful, And I love the fact that Dr. was talking about how he created a bond rather than trying to make these animals civil or put them in bondage, if that is the right application to it. And how he said, in any case, animals could harm you whether you like it or not, but they can decide not to, which shows the kinds of relations that were built with some of these creatures that will have considered wildlife, over time. So Dr. Nisha, we really appreciate your very vital and important discussion with us today. Now the floor is open for anyone who has questions to either signify by raising up the hand to speak, or just type your questions in the chat box and we'll read them to the guest lecturer. So if I may kick that, or if I may kickstart the Q&A session because of time, so that while we wait for others, I wanted to find out the hazards that were involved, not pertaining to the ban, but in terms of everyday living of these animals. For some of us who love to watch this geographic channel, or I'm not sure whether I'm right. So how did they manage to keep these animals for this long period and sustain this circus tradition, without endangering themselves as humans, in these very delicate and dangerous territories? And I'm not talking of direct harm as well. I'm talking of the kinds of health challenges that may evolve from that. Also, in terms of the economy of maintenance, how were they able to provide, for these animals? Were the fees that they paid, those that came to watch, was that sufficient? I remember when we were growing up, when we were younger, they were also televised. So was the economy that buoyant to be able to sustain, that tradition? So that would be my question.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you all for still being there and listening to the lecture and joining me today. I'm sorry about the technical some mishaps that happened in between, quite unexpectedly. Thank you for your question. This is a tradition. They actually are in their petition. They actually are saying that their tradition, they try to argue in the line of heritage, like those spectators of Tamil culture from South India, or those who argued for the maintenance of Jallikattu or the bullfighting from South India. Circus people also try to argue that their tradition is almost a century and a half years old, and their tradition is, their livelihood would be shattered by this ban. which actually did, in 1991, when this order came out, they actually lost one of the major performers in the circus, which had a long history where there were certain items exclusively performed by animals, and wild animals were trained in a certain way. There was this culture of training domestic animals like camels or dogs or certain other animals in a completely different way. And there's this huge knowledge that comes with this tradition of knowing the animal. And one thing that I always found quite interesting when I spoke to many people from the community is that many of the animal trainers saw these animals as individuals. So it's Sonia, it's Raja, or it is Rosie, with the subject. They, even when social science and humanities are still posing questions like, can animals have histories or subjectivities? The animals, trainers and the circus community had already actually looked at them with the subjectivity the animal had, or they perceived in them. Many stories have been shared with me. There was this interesting story where there was a chimpanzee called Raja, who would immediately after his performance, he would just come back after his evening performance. He would just immediately come back, and the circus owner and his managers would be fixing a drink, and so he just wants to join them. And he would just go and sit in the owner's lap, and the owner would immediately fix a drink. That was usual. That was his routine after every performance in the evening. And one time, one of the managers, just to prank him, gave him plain water. And Raja, threw the glass, scattered it all over, and before he threw more tantrums, somebody fixed him a drink and the problem was solved. So these kind of stories where they memorize a particular animal and as their own, they would remember a colleague or another circus artist whom they have met in the tent. They would remember these animals. And many of these animals, and many of the circus workers have actually told me that, especially the union leaders, the circus workers union leaders, that they are not treated well, but even though circus animals are treated well by the circus owners, because the circus owners treat the animals well because they are his or her property. But the circus workers are not their property, obviously. So many people have told me, like, there was this elephant who was suffering from a stomachache or something, and the owner actually brought a veterinarian from Singapore to look after the animal, and even though it didn't survive, but they did everything because for them, the wild animals especially meant prestige and money as well. I mean, if an elephant gives birth, it's quite rare that an elephant gives birth in captivity. And if it does, there will be a huge celebration in the circus tent. They would be distributing sweets and other things, and just celebrating as if someone's birthday or some festival. So these are fascinating things which come up with this cohabitation. And it's not just the diseases, I mean, we know that many animals had to undergo cruelty with humans, just like many of these, where the role of anthropocentrism comes in, where humans treat animals quite subordinately or with cruelty, killing and causing suffering or inflicting pain on them. In the case of circus animal trainers, the markings on their body was actually the marks of this cohabitation. Many of them, there was this trainer called Govi. I haven't included his photograph in this slideshow, but he actually lost one of his legs. And he was a wild animal trainer, and in an accident with an animal, he actually lost. And many animal trainers have lost their lives as well. I mean, this is not what does it actually take to live with a tiger, you know? I mean, this it's a fire play. And there were several other trainers who were, badly bitten, severed an arm, lost a finger, lost a thumb, I mean, these are markings on their bodies. There are markings of human taming and training and cohabitation on the bodies of the animal as well as human, so this is this cohabitation has it's a complex scenario where both human involved, mostly subaltern humans from lower caste and lower communities, would engage in a training or jobs associated with training animals, or and many of them are from the lower caste, and many of them have the stigma of this long-term association of living with animals, which is more or less the subhuman entity. Thank you so much for your question. Again.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Nisha, for that. I see your passion, in terms of this topic, having experienced the people, the performers, firsthand, and listen to their stories. Is there any other person that just wants to make a comment or a question before I ask a second question? Please signify by raising up your hand. Okay, Dr. Wosheni, please, you can go. You can unmute yourself.
You need to unmute yourself at the microphone. We can't hear you. You need to unmute your microphone. You are still in the mute mode. Yeah, let's go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Please.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Nisha.
Hi.
Thanks for that quite interesting conversation. And like Dr. Philip said, I'm here at Mahindra Humanities Center in Harvard. And of course, I have few colleagues working on, animals in Indian context generally. The last presentation we had was a lady from Bengal telling us about the kite, about airborne hospitality in Bengal, what the case is, right, about how to care for kites that drops from the sky in Bengal, and how film documentaries have been used as some moment of liberation for kites in the air. be that as it may, my interest in your work is fascinated by the focus in just the colonial and post-colonial context of animals in circus within the Indian scape. And my own question is just one, uh, and it's much more of curiosity. I'm curious about the big value of your work, because I think one question that seems to run through the whole debate in human animal studies, either from philosophy to history to literature, is the question of how do we justify thinking for or about animals? How do we justify thinking for or about animals? And this, especially, I think, has to do with the sort of construct, anthropocentric construct of engagement with animals at the level of entertainment, like the circus you bring in. Um, so I was thinking that let me play a kind of devil's advocate, you know, against the background or the foundation of colonial modernity that actually underscores the operation of circuses, how animals are. Oftentimes, you might want to think about it maybe this way, if you agree, how animals are ripped off their agency as subject and then becomes, object of amusement or object of entertainment within the circuses. And that brings me to think about the sort of political economy that underlies that, colonial operation itself. I mean, use of animals in circuses. And I think that if it is the case that this colonial modernity that underscores or that actually shapes the use of animals in circuses, if it is the case that it's basically in terms of uh, some kind of economic production for the hands of human wants, for the hands of human aesthetic needs and all, don't you think that this is some form of replica of interspecies? I can call it that. You might not agree. Interspecies caste system, some kind of caste system at the level of interspecies relation, which of course brings up the question of the precarity of the consideration of animal autonomy, which defines the whole context of animal rights movement that you're making some reference to. And if it is the case that there's a kind of reproduction of caste system from human species to animal species, even in the context of circuses, um, do you think there is a need to decolonize the whole idea of circus in Indian context itself? So that brings me to the question of course, I know you may have spoken, you might have spoken about some of these things because I joined your conversation quite in the middle. Um, so that brings
Yeah,
me to the
please,
question of
Dr.
do
Rishetti,
you
you have
think?
to summarize. You have to summarize
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of.
yeah. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Thank
So
you. Thank
so do you think that there is need to decolonize the whole idea of circus in India? That's the fundamental question. And this, of course, also brings me to this other leg, the other side of the question, which is what do you think the notion of rights should constitute when you talk about animal rights within the context of circus? Because I can hear you speak about Peter Singer, who basically, like you said, make some emphasis on the whole notion of sentiency, the ability to feel pain and suffer as a primal value for the justification of animal rights. Don't you think that circus itself as an activity is an opposition of that? What kind of degree of rights or what do you think constitutes right within the context of circus for animals there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osheni. Dr. Nisha, there's another question. Let me just quickly read it out so that I can take both. I'm sure you can see it. So, Just a comment and a question. Is it safe to say that some animals are unfairly treated depending on their location? So this is about geography and treatment of animals. Some countries protect these animals to ensure they are protected and healthy, but some countries don't. What few international laws are put in place to ensure safety for animals? Yeah. So you can take the two questions. You are muted.
Thank you so much for those questions. Let me just answer the last question first, and then I can go on to speak about the rights in the context of the entertainment industries. Yes, I mean some are treated. Some animals are. Eric Scigliano actually has talked about this, that when it comes to conservation, the conservation happens only to the megafauna, you know, lions, tigers, or elephants, which are huge, which are megafauna, which is huge and arouse certain feelings, strong feelings in the spectators. Only certain animals are conserved, and certain others like spiders or ants or you know, like cattle are not conserved, because are not under the conservation project, because they probably do not arouse the strong feelings that these megafauna or wild animals arouse in the spectators. So that's again, you know, raises the Janus phase of the law against the conservation policy of animals. And we often would think that it's okay, the neighborhood zoo will conserve these animals, and they're protecting, they would protect these animals. In fact, Dora Haraway has observed, once domination is complete, conservation is urgent, and preservation comes only too late. And yeah, I mean, different countries have different interests. In the case of Mexico, we have seen like elephants, zebras, and lions and tigers were under the ban list of circus animals. While in the case of India, elephants have a long history that goes back to centuries, and or in the case of Jellicate, which is again, you know, often traced back to Sangam literature, which is supposedly, you know, and Tamil is supposed to be one of the oldest languages in the world. So it's traced back to that heritage. So many countries have certain interests in conserving certain animals, and there is this politics of conservation, the Janus phase of the law, where the conservation policy itself need to be problematized. So that's one thing. And in the case of entertainment, yes, this is an entertainment industry, but this is also work, right? I mean, even though we call it entertainment, this is where animal labor, and human labor as well, which involves performances, which involves stringent training that goes on for years and years, not just in the case of humans, but also in the case of animals, where certain acts and certain training is imparted, where the animal has, as well as the humans, undergoes stringent training and the maintenance of the body and all kinds of stuff. But this is also an industry where even though this is an entertainment industry, it's also the working animals, like we have working animals in the forest estates, or donkeys pulling carts, or race horses, or horses being used as domestic animals. So this is whether, it's the same case with snake charmers or Kalanda community who have been doing the bear dancing, right? For them, it's their livelihood or occupation, which involves the labor of both humans and animals. Often, people who work with animals realize that just as you realize that this is your animal, the animal also realizes that this is your human. And I remember this, there was this interesting passage in Ayin Akbari, one of the oldest texts of Babur, one of the Mughal kings in India, where he actually talks about this elephant, the relationship between this elephant and the mahout, who would work with, who is working, both of them are working together. So what the elephant does is, when somebody offers him an alms or some fruits or some gifts, it would immediately hide it inside some part of its mouth, And when the mahout and the elephant is alone, it takes out and shares between each other. So there is this subaltern human being and the subalternity of the animal as well. But there is another context of animals which I didn't really mention in my talk, which is really it's the socio-political, that shape the human and animal in many of the societies in Africa, actually. Like, as in South Africa, we know that, I lived in South Africa, so I have many people have actually told me how dogs enjoyed a major position even in the post-colonial societies of white supremacist Rhodesia or apartheid South Africa, with their long-time association with Black slavery, colonization, and servitude. And the dogs the dogs owned by whites would often identify natives and terrify them even when their colonial masters were not around. Similar cases were there with the upper caste and Dalits in India. So the power politics of animal, in the case of, and many, like, one question that I got while I actually gave this talk in the Wits University was that, there are you're talking about anthropocentrism and you're talking about animal rights. We agree, but the thing is that animal rights, but at the same time, there are so many humans on the streets, or those who can hardly survive in the global South. And how do we speak about animal rights in the context of the global South? And that's actually would unravel the ethics and politics of it, right? I mean, so this is how do we understand, even when we are saying anthropocentrism, there are subaltern humans subaltern humans who are really on the verges of survival, and it's a complicated place to talk about animal rights, and it's really a complicated scenario. You have so many humans trying to survive in the global South, in the train stations or in the street, and now you're talking about rehabilitating animals. how do we understand animals and human rights in such a complex scenario? It's a complex question that, and I do believe that the human-animal relationship, whether it's in the entertainment industry or whether it's in the context of apartheid South Africa, or or post-colonial India or Mexico, we need to understand the human-animal relationship and the history of it within its socio-political context, within its historical context, and the larger inequalities that shape those human and animal societies. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Nisha, for the response or responses to those questions. I'm really very intrigued by this animal-human relations. And I think myself on a personal note of attempting to keep a puppy that lasted just 1 week, and I'm still traumatized by the puppy that I kept just for 1 week because she died. Now, in terms of the economy and treatment of these animals, at some point, because she was young and they had to make some hospital visits and stuff like that, I found out that I needed to give the puppy more attention than I would even give myself, talk less of other humans around, So by the very nature of some animals, dogs, or goats, or even plants, for instance, you need to tend, let's even go beyond animals, even plants, you need to tend and maintain the environment to ensure that these plants have all the comfort to be able to yield. And you see them even competing for survival, not just with themselves, with the weed, with other species, So a pawpaw might be bullying, if I could use that word, an avocado tree that is trying to, sprout, or this weed of no use might be preventing a bitter leaf tree from sprouting and stuff like that. And so these competitions are always there. So like you said, it's better to take each according to his own context. I think our time is fast spent, but we don't mind if there's one more comment. Otherwise, we just wrap up the discussion. So we thank those that joined us earlier. If there's no question, then let's show our gratitude to Dr. Nisha Rayaroth for your very wonderful and detailed lecture and your passion, for doing this, because I see that this is not just research for you. This is something that, you're passionate about, and you're ready to share what you know from maybe those that keep these animals or the stories that you've heard about the animals themselves. We hope that this will also inspire all those that come in contact with this lecture to rethink the ways animals are treated, and to also know that our ecosystem deserves some kind of care beyond what we humans desire. So let me just mention that our next event is going to be on in May, I think on the 8th of May. We're going to be discussing a book on the African Union's fight against corruption in Africa, with focus on Nigeria and Rwanda. So we'll disseminate the information as at when due, and we invite you all to join us for this wonderful, for what promises to be an impactful session. Thank you again, Dr. Nisha. Thank you for everyone that joined us. Dr. Wosheni for your wonderful contribution, Barrister Saratu for your wonderful contribution and question, and all those that joined us for this event. We look forward to hosting you at our subsequent lectures and book events. So in the meantime, wish everyone the very best for the rest of the day. Dr. Nisha, do you have one last word to just chip in before we close?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for all the questions. And it's really been wonderful doing this talk. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Nisha. We hope to host you, at subsequent events and lectures. And to everyone, take very good care and all the very best for the rest of the day, depending on what time zone you are in. All right, so bye for now.
Bye.